if you don't do it, quote unquote, nature's way, you mentioned breast milk and through the vagina being born, it's never really the same when you take these probiotics later in life. So talk about the difference there. When you're giving a baby through the mother, the bacteria on the skin, in the mouth, it's totally different than trying to repopulate those later in life.
You put your finger, Jesse, on a very fundamental and unanswered question, unfortunately. That is, so let's say you're 40 years old and you take Lactobacillus rhodori, our favorite microbe. Well, it may last in your GI tract at big numbers, maybe for 5 days, and then probably gone within 2 to 3 weeks. Well, why? If mom gave it to you, you'd probably have it for decades, if not a lifetime. What's the difference? Nobody knows. I think a lot of us speculate, though, it may be due to lack of what are called those keystone species, because, bacteria, like humans, they collaborate. They help one another. One of my friends is Dr. Raul Cano, who's a microbiologist in academic microbiology for 40 years. And he's really advanced this idea of collaborative guilds or consortia, where he does studies like this. He learns that microbe A produces something that microbe B needs. Microbe B produces something that microbe C needs. Microbe C produces something like microbe A needs. And when they do that, they're more able to proliferate, produce metabolites that benefit you. And so there are communities. And so when you restore one microbe, it may not be good enough by itself to establish long-term. Now, we don't have, unfortunately, that science is very early, and so we don't know. But I think the probiotic of the future, or maybe the yogurt of the future, or the fermented food of the future, will be, we say, Jesse, don't just ferment rhodori. Ferment rhodori with these 4 other microbes. And that way, you do it, and you're permanently colonized. But that we're so far away from that. The closest I know, and I have no relationship with this company, but there's a very teensy-weensy company. They're both, the founders are my friends. It's called BiotiQuest, BiotiQuest. They have a product called Sugar Shift. They call it Sugar Shift because it's a collection of microbes that Raul Cano showed when you put them together, they reduce blood sugar dramatically. Probably because 2 of the species, and sorry about these names, Leuconostoc mesenteroides and Lactobacillus plantarum, they consume sugar in your GI tract. It consumes sucrose and fructose and glucose. And by the way, converts it to mannitol, which is another kind of sugar that humans can't digest, but it does cross into the brain. And there's very preliminary evidence that mannitol dissolves the so-called alpha-synuclein of Parkinson's disease. Has yet to be proven and explored, but they're working on it. But the point of all this is that Sugar Shift product is the creation of a guild of microbes that work together and thereby has bigger effects. So, Jesse, you can see we're still too far away, and we can't really say, rather than get rhodori, get these, 4, 5, 6, 10 microbes all together.
Dr. Davis, at this point, with all the research you've done again, and now you're talking about making all these specific species and strains, I can picture your kitchen, counter as this laboratory with all different fermentations happening. Are you taking a general probiotic at this point to complement the specific species that you're breeding on your own?
I'm not, because I've been generally disappointed with the quality of current probiotics. There's a couple that are getting better. There's one called, for instance, Synbiotic 365, SYN Biotic 365, that includes a few keystone species. So that's a step in the right direction. But I think one of the most important things people can do is free, or nearly free, and that's just fermented foods. So the science is maturing. There's a husband-wife team out at Stanford, Erica and Justin Sonnenberg. They just published, just a few months ago, a very important paper. They compared the power of frequent consumption of fermented foods. These are things like kefirs, yogurts, fermented veggies, kimchi, sauerkraut, truly fermented sauerkraut, versus prebiotic fibers. Both are very important. Prebiotic fibers are fibers that serve as nutrients to microbes. And hands down, the fermented foods were superior. The curious thing about that study was let's say I consume kimchi, and I thereby get Leuconostoc mesenteroides, some Pediococcus species, and maybe some Lactobacillus brevis, you'd think those would be the microbes that take up residence. They're not. Somehow, getting exposure to those species in the kimchi opens the door to a whole bunch of other species. No one knows how. No one knows how or why this happens. But in other words, it's like you invite a couple of friends over for a party. Next thing you know, you got 200 people in there who you never met before. So it's that kind of a thing. So the most important thing that people can do is to, and you know what, Jesse? This is what our great grandmothers did because they didn't have a refrigerator. So in 1927, when Frigidaire developed refrigerators that were affordable for home use and developed Freon as a refrigerant, most people in North America stopped consuming fermented food. They're better about this in Europe and in Asia, but most people in North America stopped fermenting their food. And we stopped the flow of a very important, crucial source of microbes that either take up residence in the GI tract or cultivate the presence of healthy microbes of other species.
And is it true that when we consume fermented foods like probiotics, we'd have to do that on a regular basis because those ones don't have that stickiness factor like getting, the bacteria from mom at birth as well?
Yes. So they won't take up residence for most of the time. I'm generalizing most of the time, more than a few days. Sometimes, Leuconostoc, that's a mouthful, I know, Leuconostoc mesenteritis, but it's such an important microbe. It reduces blood sugar. It reduces fatty liver, reduces blood pressure. And by the way, a lot of these microbes make you happier too. One of the early effects people will experience is vivid dreams. Can I tell you an interesting but kind of embarrassing story?
Please do.
So now this is something your listeners can't do, but in future. So, it's worth keeping abreast of this conversation. So we all make Rotarai yogurt and get that restoration of empathy and affection for people, desire for human contact, and deeper sleep with vivid dreams. Well, I got a hold of, from my friend Suresh, he's the microbiologist, I got a hold of a super duper high potency Rotarai that is many hundreds of billions per gram. I made yogurt out of it. Looked, tasted the same. That night, I once again had deep sleep, uninterrupted sleep with vivid dreams. But towards the end of the evening, I had this crystal clear, vivid dream like I've never had before. And there was a woman involved, a woman I didn't know. But nice looking woman. I saw her hair, I saw her eyes, I saw her facial features. She introduced herself first and last name, which I've never experienced in a dream. And I felt this outpouring of affection, love for this imaginary woman. Well, I woke up. And the curious thing was those feelings, overpowering, intoxicating feelings of affection, love for this imaginary woman, continued for many hours into the daylight. It eventually dissipated. But it made me, what can we turn on and turn off love? I hadn't been able to recreate that effect. I don't know what it was exactly. Was it a combination of oxytocin with dopamine or some other neurotransmitter? I had not been able, I've even taken up to 1 trillion of those Rotarai microbes. I hadn't been able to recreate it. But I think I'd like to figure this out. Wouldn't it be cool? I have a friend who's been married for 43 years. He's still deeply in love with his wife, but his wife has lost the spark. He says to me, I want that yogurt to give to my wife. So wouldn't it be cool to have such a thing? And by the way, if we do experience deeper love and affection with restoration of Rotarai, does that mean the intensity of love and affection 50, 100 years ago, 1,000 years, 10,000 years ago was more intense than it is today? Interesting question. Tough to prove.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
If people say things like, oh no, I can't eat nightshades, like eggplant or tomatoes. I can't eat FODMAPs. I can't eat anything with fructose like fruit. I can't eat legumes. Oh no.